All right, guys, I think that's us live, I believe. So we got a very, very, very special guest, I think, for today's one. It's someone I know we are all absolutely massive fans of. And I know I speak for myself when I'm slightly starstruck here, getting to speak to her in, I think, what is one of the biggest topics of conversation that we've had to talk about on this pod, which is Arsenal Women's Champions League. So I'm happy to co-host this today with George. We've got Cloudy, and of course we've got the one and the only Lianne Sanderson. So thank you very much for joining us, Lianne.
Hello guys, anytime. Yeah, I mean, I'm still on a massive high from the weekend, as I'm sure we all are, but thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, of course. I think none of us have really come back down to earth yet.
Yeah, my voice has only just come back today, Lianne. So it was most of it was in Lisbon. So I think so.
There's some things that you have to kind of. I mean, I missed my flight back from Lisbon the week after the game, and then I came home, played in a charity football match for Great Ormond Street Hospital that same day, and then the next day I did the parade. I'm sure we were all there if you were able to get back from Lisbon in time, and it was just amazing. The club did ask me to do the parade, obviously if we won, but in my mind I was thinking, oh, am I going to do it? Am I not going to do it? My head and my heart was telling me two different things. They're playing against the best team in the world, but honestly, that parade on Monday was just unbelievable. Like the scenes, the players, everybody was there. Like it was just brilliant.
Yeah, I did know how Katie McKay felt because I think I was doing similar to her for those last few days. So it was brilliant. Like I managed to rush back, so my flight was at 20 to 7 in the morning from Lisbon. So we managed to just get there like about half hour before the parade. I was shattered, tired, but I wouldn't have missed it for the world, to be fair.
It was brilliant.
So
let me ask you a question, Lianne, because we've got so many questions. We've tried to be really good and not keep you here forever and a day. But so first question. So you obviously signed with Arsenal from a very young age. I think you said it was 9 years old that you've been with the club. And there's some other members of the current squad that have got similar stories. Leah Williamson, Lotte Moy, both childhood Gooners. What does it mean to wear the badge in the Champions League final, win yourself, but then also to watch the next generation do it too?
Yeah, it's amazing. Honestly, it's a dream come true. I mean, I was at the club from the age of 9, as you mentioned, till I was 21. And then I re-signed in 2015. And like the club have always been really good to me. And I think it was a nice touch during the week. I don't know if some of you saw, they invited us back to the training ground to have lunch with the players. I know a lot of the girls already anyway. And obviously Kelly Smith, my former teammate, is one of the assistant coaches as well. So it just feels like the club do a really good job at keeping us all involved. And I think it was quite nice to go there. And I was trying to calm myself down because I was so excited for this game that I didn't want to offload that on the players and make them feel, more pressure or more nerves. But I think they did say to me, like, they can feel it from us that won it, that we genuinely are sincere and that we wanted them to win. Because, sometimes people think, if anyone, I'd want it to be Arsenal that did it. Do you know what I mean? As much as I spent a year at Chelsea and I was grateful they signed me, and it didn't really work out when I was there, to be honest, in the end. But at the same time, I was just so happy it was Arsenal, and I really felt it in me. Although I'm a Man United men's fan, Arsenal women on my team, and I'm just grateful for that football club and just to be there, working the game for DAZN on the side. I could barely talk at the end of the game. I said to Tony Duggan, gonna have to talk for a second because I was crying my eyes out, genuinely. Just Vic Akers was in the crowd, who found me when I was 9 years old. My manager, we won the Champions League together. To see him there, the celebrations after the game with the players and everything back at the other hotel was amazing. So yeah, it was just great to be part of it. And yeah, I just feel, for me, it felt like I got closure on my football career. It sounds weird, but when the Lionesses won the Euros, I was so happy and so happy for the players, but I never really felt like that feeling of that I was connected to them based upon how the FA had made me feel previously and my whole England career. Whereas Arsenal, because they're good to me, make me feel good, and I've always loved that club. It made me feel like, that I got that closure, as crazy as that sounds.
No, that makes perfect sense, actually.
Yeah, I'm just interested, Lianne, because you talked about meeting the players before the game, and there's been a lot of stuff around that you could almost tell with certain players in their eyes that they fully believed they were going to win this Champions League, and that they almost knew something that the rest of us didn't yet know. I'm just wondering if you can expand on that, or if you noticed that at all as well.
There was, I think Renee Slegers has brought that into the team, to be honest, that kind of composure, calmness. I mean, Kim Little's the skipper. She's very calm under pressure, and it is crazy that Kim signed a year after we won it. So, and I know she's went over to America, picked up loads of MVPs, best player in the league in America, then comes back to Arsenal. And I think, it's a feeling that you have to have a little bit of luck. For those of you that were there in 2007 when we won it, we had this moment where Emma Byrne was incredible in that game. Rachel Yankee said the other day when we were at the lunch, Emma didn't have to do anything for 20 years because she never had anything to do. And then all of a sudden comes up massive in the Champions League. But there was a moment in that game where the ball hit Emma on the back of the head and went out for a corner. 9 times out of 10, that goes in the back of the net. And I remember being in the middle of the pitch trying to chase after Marta in that game and thinking this is going to be our moment. And there are turning points in games. I think in the first half, when Caitlin Ford put that tackle down on Caroline Graham-Hansen on the left-hand side and she got the crowd going, I'm sure you guys saw that. Aitana Bonmatini, he scored after 2 minutes. The defenders were defending for their lives. And I think, the game in itself, like, I've not watched it back yet, but I've watched the highlights. The back five defensively were unbelievable. Emily Fox, Steph Catley, Leah Williamson were unbelievable, in that game. Katie McCabe, Caitlin Ford, like, they just defended with their lives. And I think overall, Renee Slegers has just brought that into the team, that calmness. The players love Renee, you can tell. And what a job she's done in a short space of time.
Yeah, just before we ask the next question, Lianne, I've been banning the drum about Caitlin Ford on our podcast for about over a year. I don't think she gets enough credit because where I use the audio headset, we've not been able to see the game. The amount of stuff you hear the commentators saying what Caitlin does off the ball and how hard she works, don't think that gets spoke about enough, does it?
No, it doesn't. And the thing is, as a forward myself, I was always that player that people talk about, like myself, Judy Fleeting, Karen Carney, because we were always the ones that put the ball in the back of the net or got the assist. But I think for someone like Caitlin Ford, like, there was a moment, and I said this to her as well when I saw her, I said, I'm so glad you stayed with us. Not that she was thinking about moving on, but she wasn't really playing that much under Jonas Heideval previously when she first got to the club. I played against Caitlin a lot in America because she played for Sky Blue, which is the team now, Gotham FC. And, I've always known Caitlin. I mean, Caitlin's been playing professionally since she was about 16, playing in the league in America. And I think people like Caitlin Ford, like, now there's more visibility on the women's game. I find that they are getting the praise and the accolades they deserve. Players like Katie McCabe, players like Caitlin Ford, those workhorses that also have quality. And everybody in their team, I mean, I can't even imagine what she's like in training. She must be relentless because Chloe Kelly touched upon it in the interview we did, like how they all bring the best out of each other. They're all very different when it comes to regardless of what position they're playing or whether they're playing left wing, right wing. But I think, they all kind of raise each other up. And I think that's what we did in 2007. And I think to follow on from the question I was asked previously about the feeling around the team, like, you can feel that there's this real togetherness. I've been around teams before and I've played on teams where the coach always says, we're together. And you're not. There's weird feelings within the team. Whereas at Arsenal, when I was at the training ground and when I've been around the players, there's a real sense of like family. And that's how I felt when I was at the club.
Yeah, kind of following on from that, Lianne, obviously you won the Champions in 2007 and you've seen the group of girls do it on Saturday. What was the kind of the difference in the atmosphere, and what do you think, if there is much of a difference, what do you think kind of led to that?
I mean, I think you've got to look at the crowd, the Champions League in itself. When we won it in 2007, it was 2 legs. It wasn't even called the Champions League then, but it's still the Champions League, if you know what I mean. I think the crowd, the fans, I mean, we had the choice of playing at the Emirates or at Boreham Wood, and we chose Boreham Wood based upon the fact that it felt like home to us. It's sold out. I think there was 4,000 there. There wasn't that stand there where you could, the seating stand now, the Boreham Wood have put there. It was all standing apart from the stand towards where the players come out. And I think, now the women's game has just evolved so much. If you look at the mix zone at the weekend and all the photographers and all of the, journalists and the press that was there, there's still a lot of them that were there when I played and when we won it. Whereas now there's just more eyes on it, there's more pressure. And I would have loved to have played in that game at the weekend. Like, it was just brilliant. So, yeah, I think there's been a lot of change based upon the fact that it's become more visible for everyone to see. And I've always hoped we'd get to this place. And the fact that Arsenal have done it again, but Barcelona were going for their 3rd consecutive title. They've won the last 4 of the last 5 Champions Leagues. Like, let's be honest, Barcelona, like, we had to ride our luck a little bit. They possessed the ball the whole game. They're still an incredible team, but Arsenal got the job done.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Just in terms of how they got the job done, I mean, one of the things I noticed, because I unfortunately couldn't go to the game due to being at work, so I was watching it on the TV, and I noticed just how narrow Arsenal were. So we gave the ball often to Barcelona in quite the wide areas. And I'm just interested, as a player, what is that like to almost just give players like Caroline Hansen, Claudia Pina the ball out wide and just say, you know what, you're not going to come into our box? Like, because I imagine that affects the whole team in every position, and just how much hard work is that?
It is, and I think, again, similarities to when we beat Umea, it was like we had to be diligent and composed in our defending. There was a moment in the game where Leah Williamson was going up against Caroline Graham-Hansen 1v1 in the 18-yard box, and she stood her ground. I don't know if you guys remember it, and she kind of poked the ball away. And those are the types of moments, and I think the midfield in that game probably looked back and thought, wow, these players have got me here, you know, because you are chasing the game the whole game. I said to Leah after the game, you guys must be absolutely shattered, you know, the back line, because let's be honest, from minute one, they were not in possession of the ball. You know, Alessia Russo, Frida Mornham, Kim Little didn't get much of the ball, but they had to be organised defensively. And it's difficult because it is tiring when you don't have much of the ball. But at the same time, I'm always a big fan of, like, stats and all that stuff stand for nothing. It's about getting the job done. You know, over a season, if you play that way, you might come unstuck. You know, similar to the men's final, Manchester United versus Tottenham. Tottenham parked the bus. You know, if you do that every single game, that's what happened against Brighton. And look what happened when you play against a better side. So in a final, anything can happen based upon the fact it's a final. But I think Arsenal did a really good job of managing their emotions and their feelings, because, you know, I always say, like, that cliche of play the game, not the occasion, because it is a massive occasion to play in. Like, it doesn't get much bigger than a Champions League final, but a lot of these players have played in finals, which has been amazing, like the European Championship final, and won it, because the Barcelona players, they've won everything.
Yeah, like emotionally, Lianne, was it harder or easier watching that on Saturday or playing in the final when you played in 2007?
I think it's harder to watch because when you're playing in it, you can control it. I feel that way when I'm watching my team now. You know, it's almost like when you have to rely on the players to implement what you want them to do. So I think for me, like, I preferred playing in it because if I won, it was on me and the team. If we lost, it was on us, me and the team, you know. So I love what I do now, but it's much more better for the nerves than when you're playing than when you're watching.
It's all about controlling the controllables, isn't it? Like, you can't, like, say, like, you're watching in the crowd, like, you're thinking, oh, I would have done that, but you can't because you're watching it. So
yeah, to be fair, I don't know, I don't usually feel that way when I'm watching the players, to be fair. Like, I don't usually think I would have done this, I would have done that. It's more like you can see how the game's playing out. Do you know what I mean? And you think, oh, she'll go there. Like, that pass from Beth Mead, like, was unbelievable. And I think I'm glad people are talking about that, because she made it look simple, but it was like, you know, cutting of the back line. It looked like she was going to go out to the right hand side, and then she made this amazing. And then Stina Blackstenius, like, the touch was brilliant, the finish was brilliant, and yeah, like I said, I couldn't be any more proud of the team, as you can tell.
And speaking about the pressure and the nerves that come with such a massive occasion, what is it like in terms of player welfare? Because obviously, you know, that must have changed over the last however many years. Can you speak to the differences between sort of the 2007 version and the 2025 version in terms of player welfare?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you look at, like, the safeguarding now, players have to get changed in different changing rooms until they're 18. I went into the Arsenal first team when I was 14, and there was none of those things. But thankfully, I had an amazing teammate. You know, I went into a team of Jane Ludlow, Kira Grant, Emma Byrne, you know, Rachel Yankee, like, the list could go on. And thankfully, and I was the next one after me was Ellen Maggs, and she was 21. But thankfully, I went into a top team, you know, and there's still some of my closest friends now that when we see each other, we had the reunion at the Emirates last year, and we ended up in the Tollington, you know, it was like old times. And even if you don't see each other for too long, you still have that in common. You know, that feeling of when you won. Like, I played with Katie Chapman at the weekend and Gemma Davison in a charity game, and, like, you just still have that same, nothing will ever take away us winning all that together. So I think you have that in common. But I think the game has gone on leaps and bounds, you know, and hopefully long may that continue.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of the Tolly, have you seen all of the Chloe Kelly celebrations where she popped in and had a bit of banter with the fans? I think that's fantastic.
Yeah,
Did you guys get
it
to do
is.
much of that?
Yeah, no, you don't. And I love Chloe for that. And I mean, Chloe's been through a lot this season. You know, 1 minute she was at City, she's still on loan from City. Hopefully we can get that deal wrapped up. And like, you know, she was talking about taking a step away from the game if she hadn't have come to Arsenal and found another club. And like, look what can, like, in the space of 3 months, she's gone from not being part of the Man City squad to being a Champions League winner. You know, it's amazing. Now she'll probably go, I'm pretty 99% sure she'll be picked for the Euros. So I'm happy for Chloe. She's a top player, top girl. And, you know, when I was at the club 2015, when I re-signed, Chloe was at the club then as well. And she's always been respectful, gracious, humble. And even though she scored winning goals in, you know, European Championship finals, she's still the same Chloe Kelly as I knew when she was younger. And I love that about her.
There seems to be something really special about players going through the club with Arsenal. So obviously, Kim Little's been there since almost the start of time itself. It feels, but then obviously Chloe Kelly, Leah Williamson, one of my absolute favourites, Lotte Wubben-Moy. So there seems to always be like a real connection. Was that the same when you were a player as well? You had players who were always or sort of coming up and going through the Arsenal values, the Arsenal way.
I think so. I think probably myself and Gemma Davidson were one of the last ones of that generation that actually, you know, Gem went to the academy, and then I think the academy ended up kind of closing down based upon the fact there wasn't really any players coming through. And it was great because like they were able to go to school, and it was this new phenomenon that none of us were familiar with, being able to play football and go to school. So I think, you know, generationally, we had David Dein, Arsene Wenger, Vic Akers. So for me, we always grew up the Arsenal way. I did everything the men did, the boys did. We played that way. So when I got into the first team, I always knew what to do. Because from the under 12s, 14s, and under 16s, we did what the first team did when it comes to playing styles, when it comes to drills in training. Obviously, we were younger, so they had to adapt them a little bit. But when I got into the first team, it felt normal. It didn't feel like but I was a bit, I mean, going into a first year when you're 14 is unheard of anyway. When I look back on it, and I scored on my first game against Fulham as well, it's not normal, but at the time it felt normal. I felt like I was in the right place. My teammates welcomed me with open arms. And I remember Vic Akers saying to me, he had a meeting with me one time, and he said, stop passing the ball to the other players, because I was so nervous that I'd get in front of goal, and I had so much respect for them that I'd just square it or pass it. And then obviously I went on to score, you know, over 100 goals in 2 seasons. So that bit of advice that Vic gave me was pretty good.
Yeah, just talking about the legend Vic Akers, like you said, you was with him on Saturday. What an amazing moment that must have been for you, and even for him. Like all those years later, to be watching the girls lifting the Champions League, I don't think he spoke about enough as much as he should. Even like comparing it to there's men football managers like you, like Fergie, Wenger. I think Vic Akers is in that ilk for me.
Yeah, he is. And I think it's a nice touch that he was on the charter plane with the team, because
Yeah.
people like Vic, you know, I agree with you. He found me when I was 9 years old in South East London. So I've always respected Vic. And the fact that I got to see him after the game and celebrate with him, you know, Mr. David Dein, who's always had, you know, that connection with us as well. So, yeah, I loved it. I loved the fact that Vic was there and he got to enjoy it. And I think it was a nice moment for him.
Can you speak a little bit more about what it was like to progress into the first team at only 14 years old? That must have been wild.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, like I said, now I look back on it, and it isn't really normal to do that, but it felt normal for me because I spent so long at Arsenal, and you know, I was signed at Arsenal at 9 for the under 12, so they've always seen that in me. You know, Vic used to bring me to the training ground. I'd meet the players. They always try and change me because I'm a Man United men's fan. So Vic always used to try and, you know, think that would make a difference. And I love the players. I love Dennis Bergkamp. He's my favourite player ever, you know, apart from Ronaldo and Cantona. Dennis Bergkamp, I could watch him all day. So for me, it was like just a dream come true to like sign for Arsenal. My dad's a Gooner, so he was buzzing. And, you know, to have that, my family there when I signed my first contract. And yeah, I never really looked back really. Like we used to have a reserves team. Now it's called something different, you know, it's under 23s and that type of stuff. And it would be a team for players coming back from injury or younger players coming through. And to be honest, I had 2 games in that team and then went into the first team, scored in my first 2 games against Fulham and Tranmere, and then the rest is history. So yeah, I never really looked back, and the club have been amazing to me. They still continue to keep me involved. They invite me to, you know, the box and stuff for the men's games and to dinners. So I'm really grateful for the club for keeping me involved.
Obviously, Vic Akers himself was an absolute tactical mastermind for all those years in how he got you to set up and play. And obviously, I know that there's been a lot talked about Renee and how she's built the confidence of the team and she's got them to believe in themselves. But obviously, you don't win a Champions League final without being very, very tactically switched on. And I just wondered, from someone who's played the game, what are some of the things that Renee's doing tactically that almost are not being spoken about? Because you can't win a Champions League without having a great tactical knowledge as a manager. And I almost worry sometimes we speak so much about Renee boosting the confidence and the players of the team. We're almost missing the fact that actually what an incredible manager she is in the other facets of the game as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think just based upon the players individually knowing their roles and responsibilities. I mean, the last 3 games against Brighton, Villa and Man United, although they won that Man United game, they were leaking goals left, right and centre. And from speaking to Renee and speaking to the players, that 2 weeks without a game was a reset. They spent the first week, going pretty hard in training. The second week was more a tactical breakdown of how do we, not concede as many goals as we have. And obviously that worked. And I think the 2-week reset really helped the team. I think the best managers for me are open with their communication. When we won it before, when we won everything under Vic, it wasn't all about the tactics. It wasn't all about the stats. It wasn't all about how much you're running. It was about, what can I do to help my teammate? What is my role and responsibility? How do I implement that? Renee is also very open with her communication, which I think some players might not like it, when it comes to team selection, but you have to respect it. And that's the difference I see. You don't always need someone to come in, all guns blazing and do this and that. You need somebody that just has open, calms the team down, takes the pressure off of you. And I think Renee has done that in an amazing way. And she was at the Arsenal Academy when I was in the first team, which we're a similar age, but I didn't know that until I spoke to her a few months ago. And she was like, I loved what she had to say about me as a player. It made me feel quite good.
Do you think it makes a difference as well that it's a woman in charge of a female team?
No, not particularly, because I want to see more women's coaches come through, the FA and the coaching system, because I just don't think there's a lot of coaches coming through in that way anyway. But at the same time, for me, I've never really had a problem whether it be a male or female. For me, it's always the best person for the job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just spinning it up a bit. I want to talk about Mariona Caldente. I think everyone on this podcast know how much of a brilliant player she is. What do you think she's kind of brought to Arsenal, apart from the Champions League, obviously? But I feel like all the other players' levels have really, really increased since Mariona's come to the club as well.
Yeah, I mean, she's an unbelievable player. I speak about the club not having enough world-class players. I think we've got good players. I think we've got great players. But when it comes to that world-class category, Mariona Caldente, when she first came over, I know there's a few people that are getting a bit of some of the pundits have been saying that she wasn't really going to fit in. And I feel for them, because that's happened to me sometimes where, it's your job to give your opinion. It doesn't mean it's facts. But at the same time, when I saw Mariona at the training ground last week, I thanked her for coming to our football club. She's so humble. And I don't think it's not all on Mariona Caldente, but it's no coincidence that she's come over and we've won. She's been in the last 2 with Barcelona, and I'm sure it was probably mixed emotions for her after the game, based upon the fact it's her former side. But she's just oozes class. The quality, the ability, her touch, her ability to see a pass, her goals in the Champions League have been amazing. So yeah, I can't speak highly enough of her. But guys, as much as I want to speak to you all day long, I've got to jump off because I'm 15 minutes late to my next interview.
Problem.
Of course. Thank you so much for coming to
anytime you want me back on, but the people are waiting for me. So yeah, I'm 15 minutes late. So thanks so much for having me.
Hopefully,
Thank you so much,
See you later.
Hopefully it'll be this time next year after a